Berserk is a series that truly puts the dark in dark fantasy. This seminal genre-defining work of the late legendary mangaka Kentaro Miura, Berserk is one of the highest-selling mangas of all time. It's a series that has continued to inspire generations of fans and creators for more than 3 decades, ever since it was first published in 1989. Over the years, the manga has continued to go strong even after its creator's untimely and unfortunate demise. While on the surface, the plot of the series seems fairly straightforward, with it being a story of vengeance featuring a muscular dude with a giant sword, it's actually anything but so. Berserk is a complex weave of layered narratives featuring extremely well-developed characters and a plot that deals with profound human themes like existential crisis, destiny, the meaning of being human, and trauma, to name a few. All of this is presented to us nicely wrapped within an intricately crafted world brought to life by Miura's gorgeous artwork. It heavily utilizes grotesque and gore elements along with sexual violence to paint a picture of a dark and miserable world that's been forsaken by goodness. In our video today, we'll be exploring the diabolical creation of the Apostles, a group of demonic beings that serve as servants and pawns to the esoteric laws of causality that govern the fate of all humanity within Berserk. They serve as the secondary villains that Guts has to go up against in his quest for vengeance. These creatures were all formerly humans who, having been crushed under the weight of their suffering, decide to trade in their humanity to be freed from their pain. These are no mere mindless monsters either, as they have the cunning to match their viciousness. However, even these irredeemable monsters sometimes have tales that paint them as tragic figures, adding to the already rich tapestry of Miura's genius storytelling. So, join us, fellow strugglers, as we try to wade through the flow of causality in order to explain how these apostles are really made and the implications and deeper metaphysical meaning behind their creation. Let's begin. The role of causality in the creation of the apostles. Kentaro Miura has created a metaphysical engine of sorts that drives the destiny of individuals toward a life of suffering and desire. This esoteric law that governs the fate of all individuals in this world is called the law of causality. There's no escaping its grasp as humanity has floundered for uncountable years, deprived of any agency regarding their fate. It steers the individuals through a series of events towards an inevitable outcome regardless of their resistance. Oftentimes, people don't even realize that causality is in play in their lives, guiding their tragic existence. There really is no explanation for the criteria to be chosen by causality to receive the damnable fate of being an apostle. While the extent of this immutable law's influence on certain individuals might extend to their death or some other lesser forms of tragedy, those selected by causality to become an apostle have the worst fate of all, a notion with which an apostle themselves might disagree. These individuals chosen by causality come to possess a magical totem called a Beallet. In due course, these people are broken by their preordained fate, leading them to utter despair, which activates their Beallets, thus setting them on the course to become apostles. These apostles then spread more misery and suffering, creating a more fertile ground for the creation of future apostles, and thus the cycle continues. In this way, the role of causality is inexplicably and intricately tied to the creation of the apostles. The role of the Beallet. The Beallet is an extremely important tool of causality because without it, the chosen individual has no way of coming into contact with the Godhand for the ascension ceremony. The Godhand dwelt in a region just below the vortex of souls in the deep recesses of the astral plane. The maximum that any entity can travel through the astral plane is 2 layers at most. What the Beallet does is facilitate the 2 parties meeting by creating a bridge between planes, allowing the Godhand and the potential apostle to commune in a pocket dimension that reflects the candidate's inner psyche. Simple as this might all sound, this moment is the culmination of countless other such moments in the temporal flow of causality. From the creation of the Beallet in the abyss to its journey through a sea of eternity into the hands of its destined owner, everything is part of a much bigger end goal. We realize that we might have been rambling on about the metaphysical role of the Beallet so far, forgetting that there might be some viewers here who are probably new to Berserk, so for their benefit, forgive us for going into a brief description of the Beallets and their powers. A Beallet is an egg-shaped totem with facial features randomly arranged upon it. When the owner of a Beallet reaches their absolute rock bottom in terms of psychological well-being, along with a few other conditions being fulfilled, the Beallet is activated. Upon activation, the various facial features on the totem rearrange themselves to resemble a proper human face, and just like that, the eyes of the Beallet widen as it cries tears of blood, and it lets out a horrifying otherworldly scream. Thus, with its role fulfilled, it becomes inert once more, having set the stage for one of the most infernal rituals to exist in all of Berserk. It's to be noted that while all Beallets, including the Crimson Beallet, function in a similar manner, the Crimson Beallet, or the Egg of the King, is only possessed by an individual chosen to become a member of the Godhand. Hence, it's the only Beallet that doesn't play any direct role in the creation of an apostle. The Invocation of Doom. With all the players having arrived at the destined location, the stage is set for the start of an infernal ritual called the Invocation of Doom. As this desperate and cornered human being is presented before the demonic Godhand, he or she is given a grim choice to make. The individual is asked to sacrifice the thing that they hold dearest to them in order to escape their misery and gain the power to live life on their own terms. It's unclear what defines this dearest thing, but for most people, it seems to be another individual or a group that they're attached to. Losing these individuals would need to feel like the sacrificer is losing a part of their own soul in the process. Once this choice has been made, Void, the leader of the Godhand, initiates the vile ritual which marks the sacrificial individuals with the brand of sacrifice. These individuals are usually devoured by the ascending apostles themselves, and with that, the ritual is complete, and a new apostle is born. There are a couple of conditions, though, that one must be aware of regarding the Invocation of Doom. For one, an individual cannot sacrifice someone with whom they hold no sense of emotional attachment. Another important aspect is that they cannot sacrifice someone who has the brand of sacrifice from a previous occasion, as they have already been declared as sacrifices for another individual. It's unlikely for anybody to survive this ritual as a sacrifice, and the only two known individuals to have ever done so are Casca and Guts. Those marked with the brand are forever hunted by evil spirits and entities for the rest of their lives, and they dwell in the interstice, which is the realm in between the physical and the astral. However, as we stated, in almost every case other than Casca and Guts, the sacrifices get killed and an apostle is born as the outcome of the Invocation of Doom. Next, we'll discuss the implications and nature of the transformation of an apostle. The implication of an apostle's transformation. Upon ascending to apostlehhood, the apostle gains an entirely new form to reflect the changes they've undergone on a physical and spiritual level. They can alternate between these forms according to their will in order to help them blend better with society. These forms are often twisted reflections of their deepest desires, personality traits, traumas, and sins. For instance, the Apostle Rosine's form resembled that of a demonic elf of sorts, which reflected her ardent desire to escape her torment and play with the non-existent elves of the Misty Valley. Similarly, Grunbeld, who later joins Griffith's new band of the Hawk, was a giant warrior who held the title of Great Flame Dragon in life, literally transforming into a giant fire dragon in his apostle form. One of the biggest implications of an apostle's transformation is their departure from the yoke of humanity, which is primarily causality. An apostle is free to live life as they choose, indulging in their passions and desires. This is the reason why most apostles choose to become one, having been unable to bear their share of suffering as humans. However, by becoming this monstrosity, they haven't really escaped the effects of causality. In fact, they've become its greatest pawns. Yes, they might have escaped their immediate misery, but they have sold their souls for an eternity of servitude. If this is the freedom they desire, then death might be an enviable release. Or even in death, the apostles are damned, as seen in the case of the Count, where his soul gets dragged down into the vortex of souls. In this way, their transformation has a much deeper implication than just being an obvious physical representation of them giving up their humanity. Duality and the incomplete nature of their transformation. There's also the incomplete nature of their transformation to be considered, which adds a sense of duality to their personality. While it's widely agreed that the apostles leave behind their humanity for overwhelming power and freedom, causality proves to be not just a deceitful but a cruel master as well. Even after sacrificing their loved ones, these creatures are left with vestiges of their former life which haunt and torment them. For instance, the Count, during the Black Swordsman arc, is unable to sacrifice his only daughter, showing us that he still holds on to the attachments from his human life. Another example is Irvine, who allows Sonia to warm herself against his transformed body and is said to enjoy hunting wildlife and camping in the woods, traits that are oddly human for a fiend. This shows that while their thoughts and intentions are twisted by their transformation, the degree varies from individual to individual. If a person already had a sadistic streak as a human, then as an apostle they'll be even more sadistic, like the Snake Baron. Someone like Irvine or even Grunbeld doesn't need to take human life to derive pleasure from the action, as they weren't inclined in that manner even in their previous lives. What's tragic is that despite being promised freedom from their humanity, even after the sacrifices that they've made, they cannot escape being human completely and are bound by the same emotions that they perceive as a weakness. While it is true that they have little to no regard for human life and consider them far removed from the affairs of mortals outside, it's also true that Grunbeld drove the Tudor forces from his lands after his transformation. He'd already avenged his fallen men, along with Benedicte and Sigurd, by killing the traitorous Edvard. Yet, Grunbeld goes on a crusade using his newfound powers to liberate his land, becoming a living legend in the process. Maybe it was his will to do so, but the act seems very much tied to his human self's desires. They transform into monsters to escape the pain that they can no longer stand, but upon closer inspection, the very crux of their transformation is rooted in a human desire to escape suffering. This could help us hypothesize why they spread so much suffering and misery. Apostles aren't dumb creatures, and many of them possess intellect far superior to that of humans. It makes us wonder if they're actually aware of how they have been tricked by Causality to accept these incomplete forms while giving up their humanity whole. If this were true, then we would explain their violence as stemming out of bitterness and insecurity. They're constantly treating humans in a subhuman manner in an act of extreme irony in order to prove to themselves that they are indeed stronger than they used to be as mere mortals. These things highlight the incomplete nature of their transformation and the duality hidden inside it, making them almost tragic figures. The Godhand's role in an apostle's creation. It's impossible to talk about the apostles without talking about the Godhand. Although both of these categories of beings are created in much the same way, the Godhand are the hand-picked chosen of Causality. They are its chiefest instruments and are responsible for making sure that everything happens according to ordained fate. They do this by manipulating the individual into believing that their suffering not only justifies their sacrifice, but also confirms their predestined nature. The Godhand do not create the apostles by themselves. They're more like the unholy priests who sanctify the sacrilegious ritual that transforms men into soulless monsters. They embody the nihilism that births the apostles, as they are the primary overseers of this monstrous rebirth. From offering them the damnable bargain to starting the ritual of transformation, an apostle's birth is impossible without the presence of the Godhand. It's widely believed that the only beings that the apostle answers to are the Godhand themselves. This not only affirms their intricate connection with each other, but also further acts as evidence to prove our earlier point that the apostles are never truly free, even though freedom is what's promised to them. There are exceptions to this rule, for example, Emperor Ganishka, who despite being an apostle stands in direct opposition to the Godhand and in particular Femto, as he views himself as the only worthy person capable of ruling the world and mankind. Others, like Zod, only express their fealty to Femto much later in the series and don't appear to partake in the unholy feast of the fifth eclipse. Each member of the Godhand represents certain aspects. Ubik specializes in illusions and deceit. Slan revels in lust and sadism, Conrad is the embodiment of pestilence and entropy, Femto represents ambition, and Void manipulates people through determinism. While the Invocation of Doom is initiated only by Void, it's widely thought that the different members of the Godhand are tasked with manipulating individuals who are closely aligned with their own personal inclinations. Thus, as the chief facilitator of the machinations of Causality, the Godhand plays an intricate role in not just the creation of the apostles, but also in their continued existence. Exceptions to the rule. The man-made Beallet. One of the only exceptions to the rule is the man-made Beallet. Created by Daiba, the court wizard of the Kushan Emperor Ganishka, it's a tool made for the birth of Ganishka's pseudo-apostle army members, the Daka. This artifact is made out of numerous living apostles sewn together to form a cauldron filled with amniotic fluid. In this artifact, numerous pregnant women are thrown in, whose fetuses go on to be affected by the evil within the astral plane, causing them to be corrupted by it. These corrupted babies are then born by tearing themselves out of their mother's womb, a process which ends up killing the women involved. The only known instance of the man-made Beallet creating an apostle is when Ganishka, driven mad by fear and paranoia after having realized the gap in strength between him and Femto, submerges himself into the artifact to emerge as the twice reincarnated Ganishka. In this case too, the man-made Beallet doesn't create an apostle from scratch, as Ganishka, we know, is already an apostle. but the fact that he is given the twice reincarnated title suggests that it did make him go through the process of becoming an apostle once more in an artificial manner of sorts. Outside of the man-made Beallet, apostles themselves have been known to have the ability to create pseudo-apostles, like in the case of Rosine and the children of the village, who had all been transformed into hideous mockeries of elves. While these are a form of alternative apostle creation, ultimately, pseudo-apostles are nothing compared to real apostles. Thus, these cannot truly be ranked as a proper method of creating an apostle, as the results would suggest. Marvelous verdict! The apostles provide a narrative tool to Miura to juxtapose them against Guts' own journey and character. Just like them, Guts has had moments in his journey where he has felt utter despair and helplessness, but unlike them, he hasn't succumbed to it. While they chose the way of abandoning their humanity, Guts opted to struggle on despite whatever causality threw at him. The plight of the apostles and their eventual submission to the law of causality really highlights Guts' own journey and puts into perspective what a superhuman task it's been so far to endure all the soul-crushing hardships he's been made to go through. They're a dark mirror that reflects the future that might have been had Guts given up on his journey. The role of the apostles within the overarching narrative of the story has kept evolving from the start to now. Initially, we were made to believe that these were soulless fiends that indulged in absolute depravity and horror, but over the course of the series, Miura has gone on to paint some of them as tragic figures, humanizing them significantly. With their current role as protectors of humanity within Griffith's new Band of the Hawk, their role in the future seems uncertain outside of the fact that they're inevitably going to be at odds with Guts at some point. We'll have to see what the future has in store for these godforsaken creatures now that Kuji Mori has taken over Berserk's development after the unfortunate demise of Miura-sensei. For now though, we've come to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out the rest of our channel. We post daily videos regarding all your favorite anime, manga, and characters. Thanks for sticking with us right to the end of this one, and we hope to see you soon in the next. Until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.